You're listening to a bonus episode of the Bird Dog Babe podcast with my mom and dad, Courtney and William Bastian.
Their genetics are going to take over. Their pointing is going to take over. And if you need to help them a ton, you're gonna need to teach them to point regardless from the beginning, no matter what you would start with. It's just dogs with good genetics, with good pointing genes, they're gonna point no matter what. I mean, you've seen that in anything where you throw a plastic bag out in the yard and they're gonna point it, you know, and you throw a plastic bag out in the yard and they're gonna bull rush it, which is fine. But if they have no interest whatsoever, then you gotta teach that dog to have interest. You got to teach that dog to want to point it. You got to teach that dog to be a bird dog. Where dogs that have the genetics and the pointing and the drive and everything else along with it, you're not teaching them to do it. You're more of the lines of just exposing them and bringing out what their genetics already have in them. You're just releasing it in a structured path that benefits you as a hunter.
Hey bird dog babes, my name is Courtney Bastian and I am obsessed with all things bird dogs. And I'm here with you to share the stories, experiences, knowledge, and opinions from the women and a few guys in the industry that are killing it. I'm a Wisconsin girl living in a Montana world. I'm mom and two incredible kiddos, wife and occasional assistant to a pro gun dog trainer, traveling the U.S. talking about canine nutrition while hunting, breeding, and competing with my German wire hair pointers and Bracco Italianos. As someone who started hunting later in life because I wanted to give my dogs the opportunity to do what they were bred to do, I'm here to help inspire, educate, and connect women to get their bird dogs out in the field and experience a bond like no other. So pour yourself a glass of wine and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. This is the Bird Dog Babe podcast. Today we are back for another bonus episode with William Bastian of Claddagh Kennel to share some training advice that follows up from last month's episode, which received a lot of positive feedback on. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, I would recommend starting there first and coming back to this one. In this episode, William talks about continuing on with puppies around 5 months old and advice for taking your puppy into its first hunting season. We are a little bit more than 2 weeks out from grouse opener here in Montana, so all this talk of getting puppies out and hunting season is right around the corner. Pretty exciting. So let's get after it. Thank you to sponsor Dakota 283. Unparalleled protection for traveling to and from your favorite hunting spot. Dakota 283 kennels are premium quality roto-mold with recessed handles on top for convenient and safe tie-down and makes it easy to lift up into the truck. I love the secure door frame with high security locks so I know my dogs are safe when I need to stop for fuel. An added bonus is the drain hole in the back, which makes cleaning a breeze when your dog has been run hard and put away wet. Head over to Dakota283.com and use promo code BIRDDOGBABE for a 10% discount. Thanks to sponsor Xcel Shooting Sports, elite dealer of Caesar Guarini, Fab Arm, and Siren shotguns. Siren is the world's only full line of shotguns created for the female competitor, hunter, and shotgun enthusiast. Xcel is one of only 4 demo centers west of the Mississippi. They give you the opportunity to actually try out a gun before you walk out the door with it. As an elite dealer for Caesar Guarini, Xcel offers their customers unlimited pit stops of free service and tune-ups on all shotguns, a great way to have your gun in top condition for the upcoming hunting or target season. In addition, they're offering an exclusive deal to all of the Bird Dog Babe listeners for a free gun slip with each purchase, a $90 value. All right, welcome back to bonus episode 2.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. Thanks for squeezing into the closet another time with me. So what are we going to discuss today?
Oh, we're going to talk about dogs 5 months old, and being the hunting season's right around the corner, I guess, right up to season and through the season.
Oh. With a puppy?
Well, yeah.
So it's pretty much what we're going to be doing with Ruthless this year.
Exactly.
Perfect. You've taken her from, let's see, I think since the last one, you've transitioned her to launchers, to the beeper box concept.
Yeah, she's pointing now.
Yep.
She's just getting all that, putting all that baby bird dog stuff together.
And she's searching with her little nose.
Yeah.
And she's finding birds.
She's finding birds.
What is it with these little liver girls?
I don't know. I really don't. They just get me, I guess.
They do. They do. Because Carmen you tested her natural ability at 4.5 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And she was 112.
Yeah.
And then you tested Potter in natural ability, and she was at 112 at 4 months old.
No, she was younger than that.
Was she?
She was pushing 3 months old.
No, she was like 4 months, or like right before 4 months.
I don't know. I just remember the judges laughing at me. You're running that?
And this is like our third saw liver wire hair. But there's no natural ability test coming up for us.
No.
So it's not even going to be an option to test her or not.
No.
But it's still kind of crazy though, because it's not like you're pushing them. It's and your philosophy is very much like, don't test them until they're ready. Because I feel like a lot of people go, well, my chapter's test is on this day, so I'm going to train them and test them on that day. And they could be like 16 months old and they were ready to test at 7 months old.
Yeah.
And so then they're almost like, you know what I mean? And then you have ones that are not ready to test and they're being tested for that reason. So yeah, I love the don't test them until they're ready.
Yeah, sometimes
concept.
You think about it, you're just if you think about it as test them when they're ready, when they're ready to do the work, let them do the work. Because sometimes if you let them sit at that stagnant stage for too long, they're just going to be way too much dog, and they're going to create bad habits when they should be progressing along. So pushing him towards a date is not always the best option. Just let the dog do the work when it's ready to do the work, is what I always say. Sometimes dogs aren't ready until they're 16 months. Sometimes they need longer. But yeah, we've just been kind of lucky with those little liver girls where they're just ready to rock and roll.
They are.
A little too early.
They are. But it's not a rush. I mean, by no means and purposes is there any bonus points for testing them early and
just getting it over with and just focusing on your first season is just, it's nice.
So what are we doing what are you doing obedience wise right now
with her?
Mm-hmm. Or like what are we recommending to do obedience wise at this age? Because we're just kind of following a path with her, so I think it's just easier to correlate what you're doing.
Yeah. I always look at obedience as like building a bond. It's your one-on-one time with your puppy. You're using treats, praise, whatever. So you're really just building a good bond. And so what I'm working on with that young dog is we're just doing sit, we're doing stay, we're doing walking on leash, we're doing some place training. Just some basic things that's going to help me have a little control on her.
Are you using stay or whoa with her?
Oh, when I'm teaching a dog to stay put, I just always use whoa. Okay.
And similar concept of like when a dog is jumping up on somebody, they're always saying, like, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times people say, down, get down.
Yeah. And
then when it's time to tell a dog to lay down, you're saying down, down, right?
Yeah, we use off.
So I think, and I do think, like, just obedience-wise, that's important to make that difference for the dogs of if they're jumping on you, say off. Give them different commands, because if then when you go to say down, they're like, so I'm not jumping on you.
That's a good point.
And also, if our listeners care to know, you've also taken Ruth away from the Broncos.
Yes.
You told me that I am not allowed to put my Broncos with your puppy anymore.
No, they're kind of a bad influence on her. And I started to see some...
But what do you mean by that?
I started to see some behaviors I didn't like. So,
like what?
She just... I should probably go into how you kind of handle your Broncos. You just let them do whatever you want, and they run right out the door, and they grab whatever they want.
Okay, but they're very cooperative. Are they not? If I say to eat any three of them... Okay, I'm sorry. If I say to 2 out of 3 of them, like, Angus, come, Bracken, come, they, like, no e-collar, never.
Well,
nothing.
You have to remember I said it's okay to let her out with Angus or Bracken, but not Prim. Because Prim was a bad influence. Well, and you continued to let her out with Prim, so I said I'll just take that out of the equation. She's not going to have that distraction anymore. And I got to say, it's been a 180 total difference in her.
Really?
She's following me. She's more bonded with me. She doesn't run around. She just wants to be with me all the time. And that's kind of what you want. You want that dog to always be looking at you for, what are we going to do next?
All right.
What do you want me to do? Right.
And that comes with, but to be fair, that comes with a lot of us that, if we're keeping litter mates from a litter, or if you have mom and you're keeping a puppy from it, because it's not always easy, nor do we want to separate dogs from each other, because it's easier when you're letting a dog outside to let all the dogs out at the same time. And without you even realizing it, they are just continue to bond with each other and blow you off.
But easier always is better.
I get that.
And that's a big point for the audience.
Baby Broncos also would like to have little baby wire hairs to play with.
Yeah, and you can have playtime, that's fine, but playtime can't be all the time. And that's a good topic and kind of point for the audience is when you have a young puppy at home, you have to remember that structure is a good thing for a young dog. Crate time is a good thing for a young dog. You can't just let them run around and just have free range on everything and anything. I mean, if you keep that dog in a crate, feed it in a crate, take it out and have scheduled training sessions, scheduled play times, and have it go back in, and that be part of your training as well. I mean, that dog is really well-rounded and loves the crate and loves to come out and work. Use its feeding time as part of your training. I mean, it's really structured at a young dog's life. They need to earn their privileges. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but man, when you do it, it'll pay dividends in the end.
And I'm terrible with that. I get that. I do. Like, I know I'm supposed to make them sit before they go outside. I know I'm supposed to make them sit before I give them their meal. But Broncos are so damn cute. And they just don't have to do any work. They can just do whatever they want because they're so squishy.
I'll remember that when you're struggling, when you're training for utility.
Angus doesn't struggle.
But it comes down to obedience is a big, big part of a young dog's life. And the more structured and task oriented you guys can get with your dogs, the better you end up going to be. Your bond is going to be strong. I think we did touch on this in the last episode, is make a list of what you want to teach your puppy and be consistent and stay with it, and make sure everybody in the household is consistent with it, or take them out of the equation. And if you
you took me out of the equation.
No, I'm just kidding. But if you make mistakes along the way, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the dog's going to rebound. They're very intelligent animals. Don't worry about it. Just get back on task and try to keep it as consistent and easy for that dog to learn, and you'll be fine. Don't be afraid to get out there and train. Just get out there and do it. No matter what you're doing is better than not doing anything at all.
All right. So, gun intro?
Yeah, we did go over this once before. I just wanted to touch on it again because it's really important. And I know a lot of people stress and are scared of it. It can be detrimental to a dog's life if it's done wrong. So if you're definitely not, if you don't know what you're doing, ask for help. I think I touched on this before, but I believe that a gun-shy dog is 100% man-made. If you treat a dog like they're gun-shy from the start and progress forward, I don't think you're ever going to have a problem. But if you do it the wrong way, you hear those horror stories out there of, I took the dog to the gun range, and that's how I introduced it to the gunfire, or you didn't do any work and you brought him to the 4th of July and fireworks were going off. I mean, there's nothing positive going along with any of that, so it's just going to be really bad. You got to be careful, even with some dogs with great genetics. I mean, it can be, you can do harm and you not even know you're doing harm. I mean, I've heard stories of people taking their dog out after it's already been gun introduced and they didn't really realize that it was a little sensitive, and they're in the middle of 2 canyons and the gunfire goes off and it echoes all around and the dog just completely shuts down because it just wasn't right. I mean, there's little things that can happen you don't even know, but you really gotta watch a dog. If you catch it in time and just take some steps backward and go through it again, make everything super positive again, I think it'll be fine. I don't know if anybody's been out hunting with another partner and they shot like a little bit behind you and their muzzle blast was and you were in front of them. If you guys ever encountered that, you'd understand what the dog would be going through. So you guys have to just be careful where your muzzle is when you're shooting, and especially on the water, it can echo, and but it's just be aware of how your dog reacts, and then take the steps to make that more positive next time.
What about, I get a lot of questions, we get a lot of questions about what you're doing when you're holding pigeons up in the air and you have a group of puppies, of young dogs.
I just like to hold pigeons in the air because they're cute.
I know.
No.
You like to see them fly.
So this is probably a little different than what a lot of people do, but I learned this early on when I was interning. Then we call it positive reinforcement with pigeons. So this is doing a lot of things for the dog. You're building drive for the dog, a little bit more than we're doing with introduction to birds. So what I'm doing is holding that pigeon up, and I'm using a cue word I use whoop. But
can you say how you don't say whoop. How do you say it?
Whoop.
Yeah. Which is the same concept as a whoa.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I use in training too. Yeah. It's just whoop, real soft and quiet.
Yeah. And can you go over the difference of whoop and whoa?
Right.
And why you don't use whoa?
Okay. I started using whoop early on because it just seemed more positive and had a better tone to it. And getting a lot of dogs in for training, as most trainers know, that we don't always get the best ones in the bunch coming in. We're getting the troublemakers or the out-of-control dogs that owners just can't handle. And I always saw in dogs that you could just tell that they were getting scolded a lot. And when I did use whoa, whoa was sometimes hard to say it really, really positively, and put a good tone on it. So when you would say whoa, some of the dogs would just kind of like look at you like, is he scolding me or what's going on? So I don't know.
Because it sounds like no.
Yeah, I don't know if they were associating that with no, but when I switched to whoop, it just, everything changed. So it just kind of stayed with that, and it's been a good thing since I started.
It's hard to say whoop in an angry tone. Yeah. Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't know
like
if I could.
You're right. Whoop. You can't. You just can't, because when you want them to whoa, so right, when you want them to stop, you just use whoop.
Yeah.
I mean, even our 2-year-old daughter can nail that down pretty well.
Yeah.
And understands the concept of it, but yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah, the initial one is like that, and if you after they stop and you're going up, you can softly say whoa, but it means the same thing in the dog's mind. Yeah.
So but when you test, so the other weekend when you were doing the utility test, and you put Rune and Chief at the Steadiness by Blind sequence, you said whoa to them really hard and loud.
Yeah.
So, do they know when you say whoa hard and loud that that's different from your whoop?
Yeah. I always tell people if they come out and train quiet, test loud. Meaning for that is, in a dog's mind, if you're always, when you're talking and working a dog and building it up and when you're breaking it out, I really don't try to say anything to the dogs, really. And when I do, they really know I mean business. So that's kind of what I mean by train soft and test loud. So sometimes those dogs at the test, when I'm yelling whoa at, when I use a command, I mean, that might be the first time they really hear me yell at them in that tone, and they're like, it really puts them back like, oh, okay. It just, I don't know, it sets the tone when I'm testing.
So when you're using a place board and if for obedience,
mm-hmm.
you're not using stay. So are you saying whoop or are you saying whoa on the place board?
Obedience stuff, I'm using whoa. I mean, they're going to know both. But it goes back to that positive reinforcement with pigeons, when I'm saying whoop, that foundation is completely positive. They're stopping, they're getting everything positive in their mind. So that has when you're first doing that, you're teaching them everything's like super good. If you need to use somewhat of a negative reinforcement of, hey, hey, ah.
Yeah.
Or whoa. It's more of a darker tone, I would say. So when you need to use a little bit of that, the dogs understand that hey, I did something wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm creeping a little bit. He changed his tone.
Yeah. And when you use that sound a lot, like even with just puppies, like you do the ah, and that's kind of your no, because I never hear you say no. You never say the word no.
You would know.
I mean, better not to say no to me. No goats, honey. Okay. No more horses. Okay.
No, I use for no. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's why.
Does that work with you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, does no work for me? No.
All right. So that answers why I hold up birds in some of the pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. So when are you letting them go? So you're holding them up, and the dogs are running in, and they're going.
I'm letting that bird go when they stop. So what I'm trying to get that dog to understand is...
So they're running in while you're holding it.
Yeah.
And you're letting it go when they stop?
Yeah, they're basically sight-pointing birds in my hand.
Okay.
Is what they're doing. And then
Sight-pointing.
they're associating that cue word. They're getting an association of when whoop means stop.
And you're putting that whoop to it right away as babies? As
Baby
baby
puppy
bird dogs?
Yep, I'm putting that bird up in the air, whoop, and then they're stopping. Or I continue to put it up until they stop, and as soon as they stop, plant their feet, I'm letting that bird go. And they're allowed to chase. They're allowed to chase that bird, have fun, build bird drive. It's all a good thing. And sometimes you're adding that gun right along with that, depending upon how crazy that dog is on his birds.
What about, are you using the clicker with that?
Sometimes. Most of the time that bird is enough. The bird's getting released in a timely fashion. It's kind of the same thing.
Okay.
What a clicker is basically used for is to mark the response that you want.
Okay.
So by me letting that bird go as soon as I'm getting the response that I want, it's basically the same thing. But yeah, if you can use that clicker to mark the response and go, but really I'm just building the bird drive right now. So I'm just letting those birds fly, and I don't even know if they would hear that clicker because they're so gung-ho on birds at this point. So most of the time, no, I won't add a clicker to this part.
So if you're first teaching them to sight point, are you worried that's going to hurt their scenting ability?
No.
Does that not affect it at all if you're first putting a foundation down of sight pointing?
I have never seen a problem with it. Sometimes when you're turning to two boxes, you may get a little lag, but their genetics are going to take over. Their pointing is going to take over. And if you need to help them a ton, you're gonna need to teach them to point regardless from the beginning, no matter what you would start with. It's just dogs with good genetics, with good pointing genes, they're going to point no matter what. I mean, you've seen that in anything where you can throw a plastic bag out in the yard and they're going to point it, and you throw a plastic bag out in the yard and they're going to bull rush it, which is fine, But if they have no interest whatsoever, then you got to teach that dog to have interest. You got to teach that dog to want to point it. You got to teach that dog to be a bird dog. Where dogs that have the genetics and the pointing and the drive and everything else along with it, you're not teaching them to do it. You're more of the lines of just exposing them and bringing out what their genetics already have in them. So you're just releasing it in a structured path that benefits you as a hunter.
So tell me about how you make that transition from sight pointing to scent pointing.
Okay. So a lot of times I'm going to use my electric box in a beeper tone along with it.
Bird launcher.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm going to put that bird in that box just like I would be up pointing, sight pointing. So more times than none, these dogs, may started sight pointing, but when they're doing this positive reinforcement with pigeons, I mean, you don't really need a bird shown because they're associated that word already. So if they're running around the field and I'm just yell whoop, you can get a group of 5 or 6 of them just to spin around going point, and there's no bird to be seen. So it's more so that you're just conditioning that dog on the word, and you can also condition that dog to do the same thing on a beep or a sound that your box makes. And the reason why I do this is later on down the line with backing, it helps. And also, it'll help a dog that isn't as super confident in its nose. I think it builds confidence with their nose. So basically what I'm doing is holding up the box and pushing the button for the tone. And the dog's going to stop. Typically it's going to stop because it's going to see the box come up in the air, like, oh, he's picking a bird up in the air. I'm gonna lock up, and then they're getting a tone, and they're conditioning on that tone, and then the bird flies because they're stopped. And sooner or later they're gonna understand, when I hear that tone, there's a bird in the area. So say the dog's overrunning its nose. Say the dog doesn't have a very good nose.
What do you mean overrunning?
Sometimes some young dogs run so fast.
Mm-hmm.
They're maybe running faster than their nose is capable of working.
Oh, like we've seen in tracking. Right?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes a young dog needs to learn its pace.
Okay.
Before it can be a really good pointing dog. So sometimes teaching the dog to be more sensitive. Say it has a faster pace. It needs to start picking up on smaller pieces of scent. So sometimes if a dog's overrunning its nose and it's running by, and know that dog went right through the cone, the next time it's gonna hear a beep, and it's been conditioned to the beep, so it's gonna turn on that beep, and then it's gonna go, whoa, I smell it now. It's going to be a little bit more cautious on those little scents that it's normally running past. And it usually will figure out its pace on its own. Mm. But typically only use that if I need to use it.
Use what?
That tone in the field.
Yeah. Because isn't that just another thing that you're going to have to condition out?
Not necessarily. It doesn't need that tone to point.
Right.
No. It's just building confidence for that young dog.
Okay.
It's really going to be focused on the smell and the flight of the bird. That all those little things are just going to help it do its job.
So not all dogs need the tone then when you're
No.
Going from sight to scent.
Mm-mm. Not all of them need it.
Okay.
But if it's there and you need it, it's there. And it's great for future down the line. When you're teaching a dog to back.
Okay.
As soon as they see the dog, they hear the tone, they stop. Oh, bird? Oh, there's a dog there. Okay, I get it. Or fly the bird, either way. But we'll get into that in later topics of teaching your dog to back.
So when you're going from, you've gone from sight to scent pointing, and how are you getting those puppies to stand off of the box then?
Okay.
And not running in on it.
So I'll set up a course that's really easy for the dog to figure out. So usually I like to go, if I'm going to teach a dog to scent point and get that dog to point for maybe the first time, I wanted to have a good win that day, and not a win that's going to swirl over the field and confuse a young dog. So I want to set those boxes out where it's easily smelled. And it's an easy path of running by it. So I'll set a box up with wind, and I'll take that dog crosswind through that scent cone. And I'll know exactly when it crosses that box. And if it doesn't stop, I'm going to pop the bird. I don't want the dogs to get really close. I want them to make sure they see the bird fly. Most dogs will see the bird fly. They'll turn, they'll smell a little bit, and then they'll give chase, which is fine. Pigeons flying in the air, they ain't gonna catch it. Then set up your other boxes in the same way, and you run them through the next box and the next box, and you just keep doing that until your dog turns and points. And typically, on average, it's 2 to 3 of them in there pointing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But like I said earlier, if you're seeing the dog just power through. Like, if you have a question in your mind that dog probably is outrunning its nose, sometimes helping it with the tone may help.
To slow him down? Just
to slow him down and focus on, hey, I smelled something. And it may be something faint, but I need to stop on it because that's a bird.
So the drought that you have in, it's extremely high drive. How are you getting him to slow down?
That dog has good genetics. It is very fast, but has a very good nose. It's pointing great.
But he's like giving chase on every bird.
Yes.
And he'll go like a mile if he was allowed to chase each bird, right?
Yes, and I think that's going to continue until he gets a little mature and understands. But the main focus with him in training is obedience and recall.
But I feel like a lot of dogs will like chase 2 or 3 times and go, okay, no point in chasing because he's got another bird right here. Because you're constantly pulling up another bird, right? So like that's the whole point of that positive reinforcement, because they're like, if I'm not, I can chase, I'm allowed to do that, but there's really no point because I'm never going to catch it. So they're going to come back and get to point another bird. So they're really excited about it.
Yeah, that's the...
But this dog is like, I'm just going to chase it for a mile, and then maybe I'll come back and point the next one, and then chase that one for a mile. So, like, how are you getting that to come back?
He's very, like I said, he's a very high-driving dog. He's a typical draught, I would say. He's maybe a little on the higher end of drive. He barks on fur. He barks on feather. He's very intense. It's just something that he's going to have to figure out on his own.
He barks really early in the morning.
That's probably because there's a butterfly or a grasshopper that hops. He's very intense. He's a very intense young dog. He's going to be a lot of dog for their owners, but they're ready for it. So we've been focusing a lot on obedience because that's like some dogs, you just need a more structure than others.
So on the other spectrum, what do you do with the dogs that aren't chasing birds at all?
That's dogs that I would like to build up. You know, you have to keep building them up, and you have to take a totally different approach on a lot of those dogs. Some dogs need more than others.
So what? Just for example, what kind of approach would you take for a dog that's not giving a lot of chase?
I'm not so interested in the chase. So as long as they have a little bit, or their excitability on birds is there.
So what are you doing? More retrieves, more throws,
more throws and retrieves and dead birds
games
and stuff like that. Yeah, but there are a lot of dogs that are super smart, and you can fly 2 or 3 birds, and they're like, I don't need to chase that thing. It's when you start shooting birds that you're flying, gives them a reason. They're smart enough to understand, now I can go because he shot.
Oh.
And those kind of dogs tend to pick up that whole aspect a lot easier than others. They're typically really good marking dogs because they're watching where the fall is, and they're watching the birds fly away instead of chasing them.
So what about a high drive dog that isn't a good marker?
You have to teach them to mark.
You do?
Teach them to focus on watching. Yeah.
And we're going to learn about that in another bonus episode?
Sure. Why not? It sounds like a good topic.
The bad marker.
Yeah.
How to train the bad marker.
Yeah. That may come in handy when dove season comes along. So.
Yeah. So what about first hunting season? So like with our little Ruthless, what are you going to do with her this year when... what are you recommending people do with their young puppies this first season on wild birds? Are you taking them hunting?
Yes. You take that dog hunting as much as you physically possibly can. With her right now, she's got some obedience, still need more. She's been introduced to birds. She's done some positive reinforcement with pigeons. She's We've shot a little bit around her yet. Still working with that. There's still a few things that I want to do with her. Is we've started with her with water,
Yeah.
but I think water intro definitely needs to be done before the season in case you end up shooting a bird over water. What are you gonna do?
Or waterfall hunt.
More waterfowl hunting. You need to make sure the dog wants to go into water after that bird, and also maybe do a little bit of tracking. Typically, dogs will learn a ton of tracking on their own pheasant hunting, because there's just no way around not tracking birds when you're pheasant hunting. But to give them the concept, just a small concept before hand really helps. Just running a drag, or a running bird on the ground and teaching them to track is pretty beneficial.
And what's a good way to do that?
I typically like to start out with a dead bird.
Okay.
Dead bird drag.
And are you pulling feathers out? And
Yeah, I'll put a little feathers at the start and drag.
So
and
typical what you're going to see on NAVTA test for a pheasant track.
Exactly.
Or duck drag. Okay.
And if you're not focused on the testing part of it, and you're just looking at maybe just teaching your dog to track a bird, sometimes just throwing a wing-clipped pheasant in the air into some high brush and shooting as it's in the air and letting it hit the ground, and just let your dog run after it. That pheasant's going to hit the ground and start running, and the dog's going to have the only thing it's going to have to do is be able to do is track. So you just cater to that. And it's very similar to a winged pheasant. And
what about for shooting? Are you going to shoot birds for Ruth this year?
If she points birds for me, I will shoot them.
Really?
Yes.
So you're not going to shoot any, you're going to give up all the birds if she's not pointing them?
Yep.
Is that recommended for everybody that is?
I definitely would recommend that. Don't plan on filling your freezer full of birds if you just have a young puppy this year. The best thing you can do is just, if the dog's ripping and pushing birds up, just put your gun away. Just let her do her thing. More times than anything, if you let the puppy get it out of the system, usually a few, 2, 3, 4 times, they're going to start pointing. They're just going to respect those birds. And a lot of times, even if it's pointing pigeons in the field, you're in training, that first covey that gets up or that first rooster that gets up, they may not point it. So don't shoot it, because you're just reinforcing them to push them up. So just be patient, and if you let that dog just learn on its own, it's really going to pay dividends. There's no better teacher than a wild bird. If I could hire wild birds to just work for me, I'd be great. And along with that, if you are fortunate enough to have a ton of wild birds in your area, if you can, go ahead and get that puppy out early on wild birds. Just do it as much as you can. I don't condone running them on hatchlings and young birds and nesting birds by any means, but closer to the season here, when these young birds are flying around, they're pretty hardy already. And there's no reason why you can't. I mean, they're healthy enough. And it's really going to give you a jump start, get all those non-points out of their system before season starts, and it may really pay dividends when you start really actually hunting with the gun. You'll be able to really kill some stuff with them. Just bring your cap gun out and just let the dogs work.
Ooh, good idea, cap gun.
Yeah.
So when we lived in Wisconsin, every fall you would run the young dogs all on woodcock, and then when you were, which was a different kind of slash than grouse were in. You knew right where the woodcock were going to be, and you knew where the grouse were going to be. So you'd take the older dogs into the grouse, but then you had several days a week where you would just take all the young dogs in and just and run them on woodcock. What was the purpose of that?
Well, woodcock are a bird that holds really tight. They allow the dog to a young dog to work them, where a lot of times in the Midwest, those grouse, they don't mess around. They're gone. They're not really giving the young dogs a chance to even diddle daddle. So for a young dog to start on woodcock is great. But that's the reason why I did a lot of that. I mean, if they could sometimes there's covers where you'd go in and there's both, and if they can handle a grouse, man, that's great. That's a cheers at the end of the night. But
right. And I've yet to find somebody come up with a recipe that makes woodcock any portion of edible. To be fair, have you ever?
Some people like them.
I mean, even the dog that we fed raw to, because we had to, he didn't even like to eat woodcock.
Yeah, some people love it.
I know they do.
It's not my cup of tea.
Praise them. That's fantastic. But that's why wasn't that a bonus of running young dogs on woodcock, because you weren't shooting, you were just getting them on birds and.
I didn't care to shoot him. I shot him every once in a while, if I knew my buddy wanted them, because he'd loved them.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I just used woodcock for training. If I wasn't going to eat them, I wasn't going to shoot them.
But if any of our listeners have a recipe that would make woodcock edible, please send it over to me. We have snipe here.
Yeah,
Do we have woodcock?
No, just snipe.
Just snipe.
Yeah.
Is that going to be similar?
I'm guessing it's very similar.
So
they kind of eat the same stuff. But if somebody has a great recipe, I would definitely give it a try.
You can give it a try and let me know how that goes for you.
I've heard almost raw is what the way to go. Just flash it on each side and throw some bacon on it and eat it. But I don't know.
You can rap about anything in bacon and I'll eat it, but not woodcock.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll like snipe.
Not if they taste like woodcock. What else? What first season stuff?
Other than getting your dog out and as much as you possibly can, some do's and don'ts. We went over don't shoot unpointed birds. I guess we can talk a little bit in the depth of that. When I'm saying don't shoot unpointed birds, I'm saying if that dog stops, recognizes there's a bird there, and the bird gets up, go ahead and shoot that bird. That dog recognized that bird. It stopped. It pointed. It doesn't have to be one of those epic, standing there forever on a bird. It's not like that. Or even a running pheasant. If the dog pointed it to start, and then you guys moved forward, and the dog moved forward, and the bird took off. But by all means, the dog did the work. Shoot the bird. What I mean by don't shoot a bird that isn't pointed is don't shoot a bird where you physically see the dog run in and rip it out. Like there was no question that dog didn't point. Don't reward that dog for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next time the dog's gonna be like, oh, that bird got away, I'll be a little more cautious on that next bird, and typically they start to point.
And that's not just for juvenile dogs.
No, and sometimes that bird will flush right in their face, and they'll be like, oh my goodness. And if you don't shoot it, they're learning a valuable lesson there. So let them learn it and go on to the next one.
I feel like there's so many, and I'm going to say, of us that are just excited if we can connect with the bird out there,
mm-hmm.
and not even noticing if our dog pointed it or not.
Well, you have to be in the mindset when you're taking your young puppy out hunting. You're not really taking it out hunting. You're taking it out and training it on wild birds. So you have to be in that mindset of, I'm taking my young dog out to learn how to point and hunt wild birds. If you want to go out and kill birds, bring a dog out that you can kill birds with. Bring or what I would call my meat dogs, where they've already done it all. And if they make a mistake, It's all right. They're 8 or 9 years old. They made a mistake. I'm going to kill the bird for them. They deserve it for all that testing and all that structure that they've been through. They deserve a little bit of fun. So,
really?
Yeah.
So if Carmen breaks on a bird this season, you're still going to shoot it for her?
Yeah, why not? If she pins that bird down and holds it for me, and when I get up there, if it gets up, I'm gonna kill it for her.
Okay.
She's fine. Okay. She's done it all. She's good.
She's done that for you. You're just fine with that.
Yeah, sometimes. Just let them.
But the puppy can't get away with it.
No way.
This is so brutal. It's not even fair. Not fair.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes how much you let them fall back after what you've put them through for all their high-level testing, where they just come back to the gun goes off, go.
Yeah. I mean, look at that year, though, that you ran her at the National Field Trial out west.
Yeah.
And on your way out there, you spent, was it a week or 2 weeks, wild bird hunting her? 2 weeks. And can you tell our listeners what you learned in that experience?
She's a dog that definitely understands wild birds and pen-raised birds, for sure. And it was just my luck that she got on a covey of wild huns during the trial, and she treated them like we were hunting.
And this is your
right.
VC, DC, Master Hunter Advanced dog that couldn't hold steady for a covey of wild huns.
Well, as soon as that gun went off, she was like, all right, I'm gone. These are wild birds.
I got him, Dad. I got him. You missed the shot, though.
Yeah, I was not happy, but in the end, it's what we were working on, and yeah. I guess I learned a lesson. If we're going to be playing in the West, you got to have your dog broke on wild birds. But,
yeah, good learning experience.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that in some parts of the country because there are no wild birds, so you don't have to worry about those in trials. But
on the other scale, let's look at the dog that you ran in the NAVTA Invitational that was really loose on planted birds that could have benefited from being on wild birds beforehand.
Yeah, that dog should have been on wild birds a lot more than it was.
I mean, he spent, 4 years of his life just on planted birds solely. Right?
Well, when I got him, yeah.
And just way too much training. And started at a very young age, do you think?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. And so...
Going from one person to the next and then me finally getting him, and it was a little too much for him at that point because he was, being able to hunt over him on wild birds, it was like, this is the dog. You really are. If
you would have had that dog on wild birds, you saw like the true dog in him, like the awesome dog that truly earned all those titles and should have been a versatile champion. Yeah. But lo and behold, I mean, he really did only fail at the Invitational because he was loose on his tail was flagging.
No, it wasn't that.
What was it?
He knew the game so much. I mean, I wouldn't say he was flagging and loose. You're like, yep, here's another bird. And he'd look at you like, over here, just come on over here. Mm-hmm. And when you get down to the flush part, then he would get more intense. But he was a dog that just knew the game too well. If I were to do it all over again, I would have spent 2 weeks just out running on wild birds and then took him right to the Invitational. But without seeing that dog on wild birds, I didn't know if he was going to be like that or not. But, if to do it all over with that dog, for sure, I would have spent the time and took a week off and just went out there early and ran him on Sharpies or something. Mm-hmm. Would have did him a world of difference coming into that test. He would have been like, whoa. Yeah. It he was a smart enough dog. He would have been like, hey, that's not wild. Mm-hmm. And it may have hurt, but I think it would have been enough to get him through. But it is what it is, and it was another valuable lesson learned.
Anything else for first season?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Just have fun with your puppies and get out there and hunt. Put some boots to the ground.
What about us on this litter of 4 puppies out of Carmen that we've been very anticipated litter that we've worked very hard for and waited a very long time for. Like, we are legit considering holding on to all 4 of them for our own and raising them up. And
well, I don't know if we'll keep them all, but we're going to keep them all to start so we can make sure we keep the right one this time.
Right. Right. Well, like, what's your plan for that? I mean, how crazy is it we've never even considered keeping 4 puppies, right?
I don't know.
Let alone like 2. But what's your plan?
My plan is to separate them and not keep them as a litter for sure. You know, they're going to get their time apart. They're going to get treated like they're from 4 different litters, you know, if we do end up keeping 2 or 3 or whatever it's going to end up being.
Or 4,
whatever. But we got to make sure we keep them separated as in their 4 different puppies.
Yeah. So you're going to be guiding this fall. Do you think you're going to would you take all 4 of them out to eastern Montana with you? Or do you think I should keep 2 here and you'll take 2 with you?
I'll probably come back and rotate dogs out and we'll go from there. They'll definitely have their time on the ground and mark coveys and find wild birds and that fun stuff. So that'll be a great learning experience for them. But no, I won't be running them together. I won't be putting them together a ton.
Keeping them very separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Otherwise, like I said, I won't have a bond with them because they're litter mates. You know, it's something I have to be really cautious about.
So but the approach with them is going to be a little bit different from what we've done before, because essentially you're going to be raising them up for their first 2 months. So when they'll be 8 weeks old in September when season opens.
I'm not going to be bringing them out right away on wild birds, but most of their whole beginning and their whole introduction is going to be all on wild birds. Yeah. It's going to be kind of neat. Being here now in Montana for the first year and not really having that opportunity in the Midwest, other than the grouse and woodcock that we had action to, but there's just more of abundance of what we can do with these young dogs here. So I'm excited to get them on some coveys and quail and
it's kind of our little personal experiment. Yeah.
That should be fun. By any means, it's going to be really hard to screw it up because, like I said, wild birds are just going to teach them things so much.
Right.
You're going to have to edit that one out. We have one extra one here in the closet tonight. But,
she just worked her way in a little bit ago.
We had a little girl.
Okay. Okay. Night-night.
Back to bed.
Back to bed. My back to bed. My bed.
Okay. On that note, thanks for listening to another episode of the Bird Dog Babe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something from the content, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on whichever platform you're listening from. Check out the show notes for links to references from this episode, as well as info on how to connect through Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're loving this podcast and want to support the production and content, please consider becoming one of my Patreon patrons. Being a patron connects us more on a personal level, where I'm able to help answer questions and give advice. My husband William and I have bred, owned, and trained AKC Master Hunters, Field Champions, NAVDA VCs, and AKC Show Champions. We're excited to not only share what we've learned, but also listen from previous and future episode guests for additional content. Go to patreon.com/TheBirdDogBabe and $5 per month and you're in. And as always, 2% goes to conservation. Until next week, bird dog babes, keep them versatile.